Hi, my name is Max. I am an entrepreneur and I interview founders of startups, VC fund managers, startup studio founders, and also some special guests for BDR Academy because I am a co-founder of BDR Academy also. So, what we are doing in BDR Academy is we teach non-native English speakers how to become world-class BDRs, business development representatives, and how to secure a remote job with a US company. Today, my guest is Bobby Gleavy, an associate vice president at Definitive Healthcare. This company was valued $4 billion just less than 2 years ago in 2021 when they had IPO. Bobby was one of the first employees 12 years ago when he was a BDR in this company. So he shared his 12 years journey at Definitive Healthcare in sales and in different positions, and shared his knowledge and psychology and philosophy how to become really great in sales. Hi, Robert. Yeah, hi Robert. Nice to meet you on podcast on BDR Academy podcast about BDRs, about people who outreach other businesses, trying to sell some services and products, trying to engage first, and then maybe some account executives will help to close big deal for $500,000, whatever. So please share. You work at Definitive Healthcare. How you came to work at the company and into sales? Yes, you're assistant vice president at Definitive Healthcare.
Yeah, I'll give my story. So Definitive Healthcare, when I started there, it was a startup. I was the fourth guy in the office, and we barely had a product, which was cool. I'd never actually sold anything before, and a few years down the line, I was actually at my brother's wedding talking to my CEO's wife, and she was like, "Oh yeah, he just took a chance on you. Were cheap." So, as the third salesperson, it was basically the CEO and three sales guys that were in an office just calling on these accounts, and we really didn't have a product. And the way I got the job was through Craigslist ad. Showed up to an interview, and he was like, "Hey, you want to start?" And I didn't think much of it. And next thing you know, we had $6,000 in revenue, and then we had $100,000 in revenue, and then year one we're over $1 million in revenue, and it was an absolutely wild ride. And I have this incredible passion for just the development of a salesperson, because I learned so much in my time, and just personally, like in valuing myself and who I was. Because like when I first started, I wouldn't even call myself Bobby. I'd call myself Robert, because I thought I sounded too young when I was leaving voicemails for these people. And I'd be like, "Hi, it's Robert." And then now I realize years later that the more me I am, the easier it is to, just come through. And I feel better about it too. Cause like the more it's just easier to be you. So I'd say that early on, the struggle was I had to be perfect. I had to do everything that the other person next to me was doing, instead of taking the time, taking a step back, and like really thinking about what I was doing and making it a good fit. So like making it my words instead of someone else's words, and making it my reason for getting them, on the phone or in front of my product instead of someone else's reason. So that was like, it's a little bit different than what you asked, but I started at Definitive with no sales experience, with a couple of guys in a conference room that was like boiler room, and we had a lot of success early on. And I'd say I learned everything I know in sales at Definitive. So happy to answer
It's
any
already
questions.
12 years. 12 years. So you are started from very small team probably, right?
Yep.
And now it's how many
Oh yeah,
employees?
great question. So I think we're just over 1,000 employees, which is crazy. The growth has been absolutely incredible. To any of the young people out there that do watch this, grab on to the people that are brought into a company. So like I think a lot of my growth happened when I actually reached out to the new faces that we hired. And I was like, hey, how'd you do this before? And then I was like, oh wow, there's so many different ways to kind of, think about doing things. So today we're at about 1,000 employees, and the growth kind of happened in segments. So it almost kind of went with the money. So as we took on, our first round of investment, that was our first kind of surge in growth. And then as we, continued moving towards the next round where we recapitalized, we took on a massive amount of growth. So we went from like probably like 10 to like 50 over the first like 5 years or so. And then we grew to like 200. And then we went from like 200 to like 1,000 in a matter of a couple of years, it seemed like.
Cool. And can you share like what you started to sell when you just joined the company? What was your position? Uh,
Yeah. So my job, I was called the business development representative. Our CRO, actually, Joe Marisola, was a business development representative at the time as well, though he, was a little bit different. And I think he was always kind of set in place to be basically run the sales side of the business. So my role was BDR, and my job was basically to book. It's almost like so in software, and I appreciated that our CEO had this perspective. It's all about it's a numbers game. Like no matter how you slice it, like, and I used to have the pushback of, well, I want to have much more strategic conversations. Well, have a lot of strategic conversations is the answer to that. So you need to be smart and think about what it is that you're messaging to these people, but you also have to get in front of them, and the at bats are what like generate the revenue. And like that's another learning that I've had is I thought I knew it all. And I was like, oh, this is good. Like I've got all these meetings coming in. I don't need a prospect. We've got these inbound leads. And next thing you know, as your company grows and the inbound leads shift a little bit, you kind of have to control your own destiny. And that is like if I had something that was like sprinkled throughout this whole thing is you are in control of your own destiny. Don't put it on someone else. Otherwise, you'll learn the hard lessons that, I learned.
Mhm.
So what did I do? I my goal was to hit 20 meetings a month or 25 demos a month. That was it. And what we sold was basically a list of contacts to companies that had a footprint in healthcare. So we'd call, McKesson, and we'd say, "Hey, your sales and marketing team's going to market targeting these hospitals. We have executives that you can reach out to. Why don't you, do a demo with us, and we'll sell this relational database?" So my job was to get 25 of those meetings a month, and our average deal size at the time was probably like 10K. Um,
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah. So we've grown significantly and changed, obviously, over time as we've added to the product and stuff. But it was like 10K. And the cool thing was I'd never even demoed anything before. And like the first day one, my first demo I got, no one was available to even, I didn't even know what the product was. And I was demoing people a product that I didn't even know. But the reason I say that is you have to do things that are outside of your comfort zone to like become more
Yeah.
comfortable with them. So I wouldn't have done that, but I didn't really have a choice. And then I was like, oh, this is a little bit easier. So that's another thing I'd kind of recommend to the young people out there is it's not going to be comfy out there doing
Mhm.
these things
Can
always.
you can you explain in simple language what is doing definitive healthcare? So what is their services? Who are customers?
Yeah. Yep. So we sell to really anyone with a footprint in healthcare. So our customers and the way you might want to think about our product would be almost like a Google for healthcare would be one way of putting it. So if you're in sales and your goal is to target Massachusetts General, which is a hospital in Massachusetts, you'd go to the Definitive platform, you'd search Massachusetts General, and you'd be able to see all of this really rich information about Massachusetts General. So depending on what your product was, it would help you kind of prepare for a call or find a way to get in touch with Massachusetts General so that you could have a sales meeting. So the type of information that we'd have would be who it is that you need to get in contact with, like what they've been in the news for, do they have any requests for proposals out there, what technologies were in place. So for example, if you sold a technology that integrated with one of the technologies they had in place, you'd use our product to say, oh, all right, I want to find Mass General, and then I want to see that they use this technology. And because they use this technology, I want to talk to this person in IT. And that would be pretty much the really straightforward way you'd look at the Definitive platform. Now we sell to all sorts of different segments of customers. Today, I focus specifically on life sciences in the biopharma space, really pharmaceutical. And the way those organizations use the product is a little bit differently. But at the highest level, it is a sales and marketing tool to help better inform a territory or better inform the conversation you're having in that territory, or create better targets, for example, for the sellers that you're supporting.
Mhm. Let's talk about your career. Like you started as a BDR, and then you constantly were taking new position, more higher. So can you explain your 12 years experience in what was the position? What did you try to do new things on these positions?
Yeah, that's so my one of the coolest things that happened over time, and I'll talk a little bit about my career, but there was a lot of people that were influential. And the people, again, I really highly recommend that if you have colleagues or people that you kind of look up to, that send them a message, see if they have 10 minutes to connect, just introduce yourself or bump into them in the hallway and say hi. Because I think that it's the people that I met that helped me get more comfortable with the changes that were happening year over year, if you will. And the reason I say that is every single year, I either felt like I knew it all. So I was the king of the castle. I knew everything. Nothing, no one could touch me, which was so far from the truth. Or I thought I knew absolutely nothing because my position changed. And now I was like, oh goodness, I don't know what I'm doing here. So I felt like less than. And, at the end of the day, I'd say anytime you're feeling any particular way, whether you're feeling really great or you're feeling like you're, unsure of what it is that you're doing, it's always good to kind of ground yourself and, think about what you've done, think about why you've done what you've done. And then also, again, what I go back to is just kind of reach out to colleagues that can help you kind of get better perception, maybe, or a different perspective of the situation that you're in. And the question that you asked is, what was my career like? So day one, hired, never sold anything before, got into that conference room and started selling like everyone there sold. And then a couple years in, we were like a really flat organization for a long time, but our CRO was doing, or director of sales, I guess at the time, was doing a lot of the future growth of the business. Like, what are the products that we're thinking about? What are, like, how are we going to forecast? Like, what's the growth strategy? And we had these new sellers that we were hiring. So I basically onboarded, I don't know, like the first 30 or so sellers. And what that meant was they came into the office and, I tried to, what I thought was help them get up to speed on Definitive. So they joined my calls, I joined their calls, and it was through osmosis that they, understood what it is that we sold. And it was a player coach role where I did a lot of the selling, and then they ideally transitioned into selling the product, themselves. And that was the first few years, and I got a lot of at bats. So I think, again, sales is, not just doing the same thing over and over again, but each time you go to one of these meetings, trying to think about the meeting that you're having. And after that meeting, think about what you could have potentially, done differently. So it's about getting the at bats and having all of these meetings, but it's also about kind of, once you've had the meeting, reflecting on what it is that, got you the meeting, or how the meeting went, or things that you might be able to do a little bit differently. So I'd say, like, early part of my career was just like a lot of meetings. And I started growing more as I started thinking more post meeting. So instead of just showing up and being there, I showed up and thought about how I used my time better, and like, what are we trying to get out of this meeting? What is the purpose of this meeting? So again, back to the BDR thing, like be as intentional as you possibly can about everything that you do. Show up with the idea that you're gonna have this conversation, it's meaningful, and be there. Because the more I was there early on, the more I was able to kind of change where I was at. So that's probably a little confusing. What I mean by that is when I was present in these meetings and I was like thinking about them and I'm thinking about with like almost the end in mind of like what I was looking to accomplish, I could accomplish far more in that than just doing 10 meetings a day. Because going into the meeting I had a plan, leaving the meeting I had a plan, so that meeting wasn't just for waste. It wasn't just a meeting to have a meeting, it was a meeting with a purpose that had something to go on, afterwards. So early in my career I just kind of did because doing worked. But the more I grew, the more I spent time thinking about how I could do it a little bit differently and more effectively. So that was like the first few years, and then we ended up hiring this guy Stefan, who was our SVP. Well, he was the director of sales ops, and he was kind of like the people manager that came in and helped us kind of think about our growth strategy as it related to people. And that's when we actually started our inside sales team. And that was like that's like my passion too, which is cool that we're on this. Because the people that have come out of our inside, like there's like people I will work for without a doubt. They come out of that inside sales program, period. I'd say the most successful people are the ones that are intentional, the ones that show up that are like, hey, Bobby, why did you say that on that call? Or what did you like? That didn't make sense. Or like, you know what I mean? Like they come with a purpose, and they come to not to challenge like me or the call, but to be there and think about what's actually happening, and then ask like the questions afterward. So bit of a way to get to my career, but that was kind of the first portion of Definitive, and then in the second half, I moved into like a people manager type role where I've like started our life science, like almost like started a lot of like the how we went to market in life sciences, if you will, which is a different set of because then in that world we were working with inside salespeople, but it was a very different approach. It was much more tailored and much more thoughtful, and there's a lot more tools that we needed to use to kind of get an edge and separate ourselves from the other people that were trying to book meetings. But that's kind of the first part of the career, and then I move into like more of like a people manager type of role.
So if we look at current sales at Definitive, how you can explain what are roles in sales? So how this structure works inside of organization? What is the role of BDR? Do you have only local BDRs? You do, or you work with some remote people also? And like, what is the role of BDR? What is the role? I don't know. Do you have account executives?
Yeah, I'll
Something
give you
like
the
this.
structure. Like kind of how the it's like the motion of the sale, like how it
Yeah.
goes from start to finish almost.
Yeah.
So our organization's like a little bit more complex today than it was previously, but I'll talk about it from the perspective of predictable revenue. So predictable revenue is the Salesforce model, and or maybe it's not the Salesforce model, but I think someone from Salesforce had written the book, and that was something that the guy Stefan had brought into Definitive, and the concept of it at the highest level, which I don't hold me to this, but is essentially to create as many meetings as you can, create a team, organically within the organization that is promotable and has the skill set to move into, a seller type of role while equipping the sellers to sell more. And their job becomes, all right, we're going to move meetings from, discovery to evaluation or evaluation to negotiation. And we're going to spend, our inside sales team, or at Definitive, we called it inside sales, but our SDR team would be the ones that would go get, the meetings and generate like the activity. And then we'd have marketing as well that would come over the top. So BDR calls on the account, and is the goal is to set up a meeting. They set the meeting up. It depends. Gone through a few different variations of this. My personal preference is that they stick with the meeting that they set up, because they should want to like pursue that, or maybe, I mean, people do what they want, but in my opinion, I would want to pursue what occurred after I set up this beautiful meeting. I don't want to make sure that it gets to where it needs to get to. So they set up the meeting, and then usually it depends on like the relationship with the BDR and the sales exec. So if it's like a 1-to-2 or 1-to-1, then they're going to be part of like the follow up, and they're going to be part of like how they get the next meeting set up. But if it's, more of like someone that's just kind of setting meetings up for like a segment, if you will, they'll typically set the meeting up, and then, ideally listen to the call, and then that would be where, the buck stopped, if you will, unless they requested to continue, listening into the meetings, which they of course could. So BDR sets up the call, and then it gets transitioned to a demo. Initial demo is usually like a discovery, have a conversation, and then depending on, again, what the customer is interested in buying, the sale could be, turned around in 24 hours, or it could take, like the sales that we do now take 6 months in some instances. So it really depends on like what it is that the use case is and that you're selling. But usually it goes from demo, we have a demo, and then there's a follow-up that happens after the demo. Usually the initial demo is to just figure out what it is that they're looking to do, how we might be a potential fit, almost qualify if they have, what we need to be a good customer, just as much as they're qualifying us to be a good vendor. And then the ISR kind of falls off, or if it's a 1-to-1 relationship, they'll, the way I did it, I used to have like really good relationships with the inside sales, because it's like the way I thought of it is like, I'm me, you're you, and no one's different than the other one. We have our jobs, and I do my job well, you get paid. You do your job well, I get paid, and that's just how it works. So what we would do is like, we just had a system. So they were like, I'm, I think good at selling. Organization might not be my perfect and first and foremost skill set. So I had a lot of good relationships with ISRs that would help in doing, not doing like the follow up, like we'd meet and we'd talk about it, but like they'd help with like the cadence of making sure that we got to that next meeting. So that is, if you have the opportunity to pursue beyond the first meeting, I highly suggest that you try and stay in the mix, if you will, because that's where sales happen. Because one of the hardest things from an SDR getting promoted to a BDR is that it's the, oh, what do I do now? And it's not, oh, what do I do now? Because you know what you do now. It's what do I do now? And I haven't done that before. So it's more of like actually getting to that next step and like trying to like, have the conversation beyond just setting up the initial demo. And then obviously like usually it's like a couple of meetings, and depending on the, deal size, it'll close. I mean, I can go into the full sales cycle, but from a BDR perspective, and then I don't know how they're paid today, and I don't even know if I really talk about it, but usually from what I've heard in the past, and not definitive, but just generally speaking, there's some sort of tie to the meeting that was set up if a deal closes off of that, and then like a flat rate for the meeting that gets booked usually. At
Mhm.
least that's, I think, how we've done it in the past. Not, I can't comment, especially
Mhm.
as we're publicly traded. I don't think I can comment anyways, but I don't know. That can be cut.
Mhm. And it's important to BDRs to learn more about how the deals actually close, because like if they want to progress in their career, if they visit these next meetings, I think it is much easier to understand what is happening after I set a meeting. And how is it done really? Like, do you have online meetings or offline? You usually meet your customers. Maybe COVID somehow affected this process.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So a lot of this is online, and just to that point, and generally speaking, I think a lot of organizations are focused on digital now. Software, this is just my take, but like software has been very much focused on a waterfall type sales approach, where it's like looking at how many leads you're getting and converting the leads to pipeline, and then converting the pipeline to close deals. And over like COVID, when hospitals and stuff were shutting down, like I personally thought I saw a lot more of that type of approach, I guess more in like the life sciences space too, where it was like, all right, let's measure how many meetings we're getting. And not that I don't know enough to say that they weren't doing that before, but it just seemed like it was more on the forefront of like almost how much like a cost per lead type of approach. So how do we sell? It's for I'd say 90% of it's on Zoom. And nowadays, so like and then the process too, like my uncle is an enterprise seller. He's been selling for a long time. And like I remember talking to him about this on-site meeting I was going to do and what I did to prepare for it. And he was like, it's like, that is not preparation, my friend. That is not how you go visit a customer, sir.
Mm.
So one thing I like to do is now spend a good amount of time preparing for the meeting. And like, so there isn't in like, I like to have an internal meeting, even if the ISR is the one setting up or SDR is the one setting the call up. Like I want them to kick the thing off. Cause like, why not? Like if you're going to be on the call, I also have a firm belief that everyone should have a part. Cause like, why not? And it also makes it like more of a comfortable environment, I think, for everyone that's on the call anyway. So usually it's an online meeting. We'll do some sort of prep meeting beforehand where we'll, do the pre-call plan. And then from there, we'll get on the phone. And again, depending on the deal size, for the most part, it's going to be, over Zoom. I've gone on site, like used to go on site, I think more like before leading into COVID, I think. So I was leading a sales team at the time, and it was I think we were going into the second quarter maybe. I had been on site like 4 times the previous quarter. So it wasn't like we were going too often, but once a month I'd say we'd have like a big meeting where like ideally I'd love to go on site all as much as possible if our customers were open to that. But like the reality is that not everyone's in the same place, and it takes a lot to make that lift. If you haven't done an on-site or an in-person meeting, like there's a lot of planning that goes into it. There's a lot of stuff that is beyond just what happens in the meeting. So seemingly some companies have preferred to just try and catch up on the phone, and if need be we can deliver in person. But for the most part, everything that we're doing is over the phone, and delivered over email, or not the phone but over like Zoom or uh, Teams or whatever.
Uh-huh. If you know how the process of hiring BDRs is done in your company, so can you share what is important in BDRs? How do you look for them? And maybe also, do you work remotely or you work
Oh yeah,
in an office?
I'll start with the remote because that was part of the prior question. So yes, we do work remotely. There is an office, and I think like a lot of the world, we're trying to find the right balance of getting back into the office. So there's some initiatives around that, but a good portion of the company's remote still. And I think COVID, it was COVID in the growth too, but like the cool thing about hiring remote is you get the pool of talent just opens up significantly. So we do hire remote, and we are a global company now. So with the acquisition of Monocle, which is one of our sister companies, which was in Sweden, we have and then we also acquired Analytical Wizards as well. So now we have operations around the globe, whereas we were primarily in the US. So a lot of that has helped driven our ability to do that. Cause there's also like all sorts of, like, I'm not in HR, but my understanding in just working with employees that have traveled, there are a lot of regulations around how employees are paid and like the taxes and like what requirements based on origin of country and like what the country's rules and regulations are. So there's more to hiring globally than I guess I initially thought. But we do hire remote and we hire globally. So that was the last question. What was the question before I
What was
answered
the
it?
process? What was the process of choosing what is important
Ah,
in?
yes. So how do we hire? Like, what do we like about a
Yeah.
candidate? So I can't speak for the the like our recruiting team, which actually like our recruiting team, I think is spot on. I think that they're like a really genuine, which I think is important in recruiting, is like you get someone that's like actually answering your questions and like having a real conversation and trying to like figure out if you're a fit and vice versa. So I appreciate the recruiting team that we have. But the things I look for are, I what matters the most to me is, are you gonna do it? Like, what's your motivation? Like, what drives you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? Like, I think what connected for me was the way I talked to Jason, our CEO, about, like, I was like, I'm here. Like, this is what I do. This is what I'm going to do. This is why I'm passionate about this. And I think it was more of like, I'm betting on myself here and now, than, I guess, my educational background at the time for the sales role. So I think you're like, you get in the door through your resume, or your whatever, the however, I don't know, what the average age of the ISR is. I'd say that this is probably first job oftentimes out of school. So you get the interview, but I think what's really important in the interview is being curious. Like, the best salespeople are just constantly curious. And it's not a curiosity of, I'm going to write these 10 questions down to get to the bottom of it. It's just like the conversation we're having here. Like, you're like, oh, that's interesting. So let me ask you about this. So I think that just being curious about the company and the person that you're interviewing with is going to help you. And then also having some self worth too. So making sure that you ask questions about the role as it relates to your skill set, and just better understanding if you're a fit for them. So you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. So those are just some pointers to the interview. And then, like, the things that I look for are just, I love stories about where people just had to face some adversity, I guess. Like, adversity to me is a huge thing. Now, you don't have to go through adversity to be successful by any means, but when I look at my life, I'd say one of my hated quotes, but favorite, is, it builds character, Bob. My dad used to say that all the time. Builds character, You just got, you just lost the game. It builds character. So I'd say that, like, people that have, like, a good amount of experience, in life, I tend to, like, gravitate towards and tend to do, well, because they're showing up for the job, and they're like, it's almost like they're showing up for themselves too. That's another thing that I've learned is, one of these guys I worked with last year, he was a manager for a long time and came back to individual contributor. Just, it's what fit him. And he's like, Bobby, we work together, my friend, but I show up to hit my pipeline. If I don't have my pipeline, I can't get paid. So my job is to get paid. So those are the people that back into their number, and they're like, all right, this is how I'm going to approach this. So if you've never done it before, a suggestion could be like, how do people typically do it there now? I want to learn from everyone else. I'm going to come in there and work hard, and do my best, and just kind of be, like, honest. Like, don't oversell yourself. Just be like, if this is who you are, just be hungry, and make sure you follow up, because that follow up is so important. Because, like, if you don't get the follow up, it's like, I know you're busy, man, but, like, follow up. So I know that didn't necessarily answer the question, but hopefully it was a helpful answer
Yeah, yeah.
itself.
This is already like a philosophy and psychology how to be a great BDR. So you have to overcome. So nothing is impossible for BDR. Then what also you said that try to learn more and be curious. How to say be curious.
Yeah, curiosity. So one of the things that I work with my brother, and he's in sales, and the chief marketing officer at one of his companies said to him, the quality of the questions that you ask will determine, and this is when he was in inside sales. He said SDR, the quality of the questions you ask will determine the quality of your life. It's like,
Yeah,
that
yeah. This
that
is great
hits.
philosophy.
That hits. So think about that. Like, if anyone leaves here today, like, think about that one.
Yeah,
Because I think about that
I used to
always.
meditate regularly, like every morning and every evening doing meditation, and the same approach, like how I meditate today, is the same quality of life I'll have. So it was like big motivation to
Yeah,
do things.
like we could. That's like a whole nother philosophical
Yeah, yeah.
conversation in itself. Like you said, you meditate, but yeah, we don't have to get into that. But there's so much of that. Like, The
Yeah.
more you can look at yourself in the mirror and the more you can hold yourself accountable for your success, the better off you are. And the worst things that have happened to me is like sometimes you have success. Like I played baseball and like every level I went up, I was like, oh, I stink again, you know? But like once I hit to that level, like got to that level, I was like, oh, I'm great. You just need to remember that you're great, but you can always be better. That's the way to think of it is like, don't put yourself down because you're not going to be able to grow. So you just want to remind yourself of the things that you're good at and then focus on those and, try and brush off the things that aren't gonna like that you can't control and aren't gonna impact you. Like there's some real psychology in sales. Like your success as a seller beyond being in inside sales is how you approach it, how you prepare, and how good you are to yourself and how you believe in yourself and get yourself prepared to have these conversations. Because you can say I'm not good at it, but what did you do to prepare for that conversation? And are you asking yourself that question? So that's the other thing that's been great about like having all of these new people come in is if you let them in and you let them offer their perspective, you can learn a lot. And it's not that you stink because you didn't know. It's now you have something new and you know something new that you didn't know before. That's the way to think of it.
Yeah. So now I want you to share what we do and get your feedback. Like,
Yeah, of
is
course.
our approach working or not? So how do you think about it? So
Absolutely.
we create 5 months online course for aspiring BDRs who are going to become world-class BDRs. So it is not just like a person who is first time in sales and going somewhere, going to making application to job postings, and but it is really prepared 5 months guy who did all about like predictable sales, how the decision are made in B2B, like how to conduct a product research and understand the value chain,
Yep.
ICP, what is idea customer profile of your. So a lot of, and it's only like uh, maybe 10% of what we will teach. And the unique part of our program is that the same skills you develop as BDR for your work. So when you, for example, like outreach and write email or LinkedIn message to someone, the same skills is needed to find an employer. And what we want to do in our program is to show how BDRs work and then apply this to finding a job. So our students will create a network of their future employers, potential employers. They will like find, for example, they decided, oh, I want to focus on biotech. So I
Yep.
want to become a great BDR in biopharma, biotech, and like life sciences. So he will dig into this sphere. He will learn like what startups are there, what they sell, how this work, how can I outreach to my future employers. So he
Hmm.
creates like a connections on LinkedIn with future employers, post something about biotech news, or like what maybe even doing some manual research in some sphere, like, oh, I found like there are 25 companies which are doing on this specific niche
Yep.
biotech. So
I,
and then
I'm loving everything that you're saying so far,
and
and I'll tell
then
you why. But I'll let you finish.
yeah,
Obviously.
and then in 5 months, so they already have like 500, maybe 1,000 connections of potential employers who knows them that they're studying how to become BDRs, and especially they choose a niche. So I want to do BDR for all spheres. Of course, it is like you can be BDR for everything, but you develop your knowledge in some specific niche, create a network in this niche, and then you show like, oh, I am open for work as a BDR for a biotech company. So how
Do
many
you want to
applications?
send us those resumes right now, Max? Do you have anyone in biotech that you want to just pass them straight to? Like that is the gold right there. Those
Yeah,
people that you're talking about at the end
yeah,
of that program is
yeah,
worth lots of money to people like me.
yeah, yeah. And people, so imagine that like we are doing our program, we sell this course, and we guarantee that people will get at least ha ha ha, $2,000 a month. So this for them it's really like big opportunity in their career because someone is making like $1,000 a month, and when we say that, oh, in the US company you can, so 2,000 is very 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 starting small position. Actually, like
Yeah.
average BDR salary in the US is 60,000 a year, so it's 5,000 a month.
Yep.
And so yeah, and we create this trust due these interviews, podcasts, to understand that yeah, it's really there are companies who are eager to find prepared BDRs.
Just like what you said, just for the like my own personal like experience, until I do something I don't know how to do it, what you just described was a lot of work to figure out. You know what I mean? Like to have the ability to have that knowledge before walking into like you're going to elevate yourself like significantly over the pack. Like just knowing a little bit something about the industry is a huge bonus. And then like you mentioned an ICP, like to be able to just talk about an ideal customer profile, like that, like a big part of prospecting and being successful is identifying like low hanging fruit and being able to message that low hanging fruit the right way and also follow up that messaging. So my guess in your BDR Academy is that if they're picking a niche, you probably give some high level stuff on the niche itself, but you also give them, a plan to like, all right, this is what a drip campaign might look like, and this is how you do it, and this is the type of content that it starts with, and this is the follow up, and like just being able to know that, because I feel like that's where a big part of like my time I think was spent early on was just helping fine tune that stuff. Because the more you invest in that, the easier it is going forward because then you don't have to, spend all the time doing it yourself because you can trust that someone else is doing it. So those are the things that I think are like invaluable. Like as I look to, be a leader in the next level, right? So I'm a people leader of a first line managers. Becoming a people leader in second line, like to second line, is like you have to have experience to do it, or you have to be able to like talk about it, or have a program that maybe you've done, or a story that you can tell. This is just like that before your career starts, in my opinion, or maybe not, because you'd said that these are some folks that have been doing it for like a year or two. But like, yeah, I think that this is a great, I don't know the financials and investment and stuff, but like, if feasible, this is an absolutely, because it's sometimes it's hard to invest in yourself too. That's the other thing that I've learned is sometimes it's hard to invest in yourself, but it tends to pay dividends. And the people that I see investing in themselves, like really investing in themselves, are usually the more successful people that I work with, ideally.
All right, it's interesting to ask a question. So you were one of the first employees, right?
Yeah.
In the company, and the company like IPO'd, so it
Yeah.
had IPO less than 2 years ago, and was valued like $4 billion. Wow! And did you have shares and full stock options when you started?
I'd say so. Since we're on an interview, no, in all seriousness, I think the company did a really nice job of, you know, making sure everyone could participate in its success, if you will. And I also like, for those of you that are at startups and stuff, like this is just a lesson too. Is there's different perspectives of how a business is created, and there's different value that there's value that you bring by being a strong seller and bringing revenue in the door, but there's also like different value when you're thinking about the capital that's being invested in the products, for example. So you know what I learned, and I am grateful for Definitive, and I'm grateful for the way that I was able to participate in the IPO. um, I think as a younger person, I thought I was entitled to more, to be honest. Now, that's just, I think everyone should feel the way they feel and, pursue what it is that, is passionate to them or of, the greatest interest. But it is also helpful to, get more perspective and the full 360 view of, so say if you're in a company that is about to IPO, just try and learn, what typically happens in an IPO and how like vesting works and like just stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, the more you know, the better off you are. Because like for me at least, there was a lot of learning. So yes, I did get to participate in it, and it was awesome. But it was almost like I didn't understand enough. So every step of the way, there was like another piece that I was like, oh, I didn't know what that was. Like, so I just highly recommend, like, if you don't know what an RSU is or MI, like, whatever it is that you get, go ask a friend. You don't have to tell them what you got, but like, just talk about it so that you have the right expectations on your end, is the way I'd put it.
And can you recommend to BDR go to established company like definitive, or to go to a new startup with 10 people? So what is your choice? How do you think about it?
I It depends. I mean, if you, I'd recommend going to a place that's probably a little like, if you want to map out your career, going to a place that's a little bit more established is likely to get you a much cleaner path to the knowledge that you need. Now, I'm different than like all the people that I like work with that like came up in a company like that has like the Sandler training and stuff, but like, I have a lot of different value that is just from, the school of the hard knocks, if you will, and being placed in the fire and having to think about it and think differently and not have like the playbook. But I would like, there's a lot of success that happens with people that have come from like, they go to like a bigger company. Cause like, just even like some of the sellers that I work with now, it's like, you can't unteach that process sometimes.
Hmm.
So, I loved my time at Definitive, and I think that there's a ton of opportunity in startups, and like being a generalist is good too. Cause like I had to do, like, I was doing like marketing stuff as a BDR. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I got my hand, like, I was negotiating M&A contracts with like the CFO of these massive companies, like, you know what I mean, you get that opportunity, like redlining contracts in legal terms, you know what I mean, and like doing the red lines. So like, for those are the things that like I'm grateful to have learned. But if you asked me, like, it took me my management time to actually learn how to do a really good, call campaign. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't learn how to execute on that at the Definitive early days. It was, hey, you have a team, you have these numbers to hit. This is a QBR. I need to know what your initiatives and priorities are. And I was like, what is an initiative and priority? So like, you get like two different versions. Is like, I always did, and it was always successful. And I think I have like a lot to offer, and I can work very agile. Like, I'm super flexible. But there's some tools in the toolkit that I think you pick up when you go to a company that's a little bit more established. And people know those companies too. So it's like, oh, you came from IBM, cool. Then I know they trained you. You spent a year there, so I know at least whether you were successful or not. I at least know that you got a year's worth of training, so
Hmm.
I can put that under my belt. So that, I don't know. It doesn't give you a perfect answer for that, but hopefully it is kind of close.
Yeah. Cool, Bobby. Can you give final advice to future aspiring BDRs?
Yes, the quality of the questions you ask will determine the quality of your life. Um, I Be curious, like as curious as you possibly can. And what I mean by that is not, I'm going to write these three questions down and ask these three questions. Just ask more questions about like what you're getting back in the conversation because you're interested. So curiosity, like genuine curiosity is like really important. And believe in yourself, because you have to believe in yourself. And if you're not believing in yourself, then reach out to a colleague, find a friend, make a list of the things that you've done well, because it's too hard out there not to give yourself a little love.
Oh,
So those would be
cool.
the points that I'd leave y'all with.
Yeah, great. Thank you.